I'm Elliot Gerson, Executive Vice President of the Institute, and I'm really thrilled to have you here this morning because what we're about to discuss is an enormously important, incredibly exciting new initiative of the Aspen Institute. Sylvia mentioned to me just yesterday, she may say this again, that in her view, the idea that this group has may be the biggest idea of all time. That's quite a statement, but I don't think it's out of the question.
Go back to the 1950s. People had already begun to take claim of the ocean, the border around the shores, out 3 miles, out 12 miles in some cases. But there was the idea, and it still persists, that the high seas belongs to everybody, the global commons. Everybody uses the global commons, and we think about how do we use the global commons? Well, we use it as a dump site. We use it to take things out, whether it's oil or gas or minerals or fish. What we haven't really faced up to until right about now is that the most important thing that we take from the ocean is our existence. The high seas, the area beyond national jurisdiction, covers half the world, 64% of the ocean. It's the largest wilderness on Earth, home for most of life on this planet, and now vulnerable to legal and illegal fishing.
You have overfishing near shore, and the fish have disappeared largely. And so ships are going much further out from shore to catch a bare minimum. And they stay out there, sometimes for years, and they just keep fishing. Purse seiners, trawlers, longliners.
If we could stop fishing in the open sea, that's a place anybody can go from any country individually or whatever and take what they want. What would actually happen, and 2 studies have shown this, I mean good science, and the total productivity in fisheries as well as protected biodiversity would increase several times.
The international law of the sea came into effect finally in 1994. That's when nations overall began to look at what could be done to govern the high seas. So we now face the opportunity to make choices. Fewer than 300 white sharks swim to California from 2 mysterious offshore habitats. The waters surrounding Hawaii and an unexplored wilderness, the subtropical gyre nicknamed the White Shark Cafe. This almost invisible migration is being revealed by Stanford University's world-renowned scientist, Dr. Barbara Block.
Here we are flying above the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Spectacular view today, and we've been studying this region for some time, and what we've learned from the tagging is that the largest migration on Earth occurs beneath the sea here.
Most of the shark migration is far beyond the 200-mile boundary of American waters. On the high seas, there's no protection and extensive international fishing.
It raises the question back at the cafe, what could be happening out there? We started looking with satellite technology that picks up radio signals from ships transiting high in the sky and Google's Global Fish Watch.
What we saw was Japanese longline vessels and other longline vessels who are transmitting through AIS to the satellites.
Barbara and a community of researchers are on a mission to gain World Heritage designation for this ocean realm and protect it the same way we protect the Serengeti Plains of Africa.
Oceans are our last frontier, and we're going to put up on the screen a presentation here. There's 3 key things that scientists are trying to figure out. How fast are oceans warming? How much of our oceans are becoming deoxygenated or hypoxic? And we know that oceans are getting more corrosive. So imagine a tuna who's pulling the largest gill surface area to support its high Olympian metabolism through the ocean, who's now exposed to corrosive and hypoxic seas. But the most important thing we're trying to talk about today is the defaunation of Earth, taking the large predators out of the sea, like the tunas, the sharks, the mantas, and it's happening primarily due to 10 nations in the global commons who are not really paying attention to the rules. We ourselves, we're using new technology to see where the fish are so that we can build the Yosemite parks of the future that will allow us to keep human predators away from the fish. We do this with an advanced set of biologging tools, and the advanced set of biologging tools are an ecosystem of engineering tags that can be placed on animals throughout the planet that give us an idea of where they are. And once you go beneath the sea, it's not transparent, so it's very difficult to follow these animals. But companies, overnight in the last decade, have produced millions of dollars of these instruments. Each one costs about as much as your laptop. You throw it in the ocean on a turtle, a tuna, or a shark, and then we find out where it goes. By learning where these animals go, these are just two examples, $50 million worth of projects. We're able to point out where the hotspots, the corridors, the places that we need to protect are in our global oceans covering 70% of the Earth. One of the most promising new technologies is a CSI for the oceans. Using a liter of water, we can tell who swam by, who's been there, and we can do it at a very low cost. So we could imagine going to the places that Sylvia is trying to protect, getting a census overnight, and being able to keep track of who's there. We're envisioning new anti-theft, anti-poaching tags that are similar to what happens when you go into a store. There's a psychology not to steal. And as you exit the store, we know that basically you'll be caught in part because of radio technologies. Imagine chipping the fish of Earth with a chip the size of what is in a clothing tag, with a chip that can talk to Earth-orbiting satellites and tell when a poacher has removed a shark from a highly organized marine protected area. Imagine tomorrow if we could chip and make accountable on all the tunas being taken from the sea for the RFMOs, their travel from where they're landed to where they're sold. And then from our friends at Liquid Robotics, this is what we're thinking about now. Autonomous vehicles and drones that once set up around protected places like Chagos in the British Indian Ocean Protectorate, they're listening for ships. They're identifying when incursions happen, and within seconds notifying Earth-orbiting satellites and telling patrol boats where this incursion has occurred. We have the future in front of us. Wearables that will be taking advantage of the OneWeb, the SpaceX constellation of satellites, that will give us an opportunity with reduced cost of chips to put chips on everything, including wildlife in the ocean that's being taken out at unsustainable rates. That's the science of both now and the future.
Thank you, Barbara. David, you've been a leader in the movement to preserve national parks. You've also been a leader in protecting the Sargasso Sea, which is in the high seas. Tell us about what you've learned about the promise and challenge of protecting the high seas. But let me give you a second first, and we're going to watch another clip.
One area of the high seas that's getting attention for protection is the Sargasso Sea. It's a broad area in the southern end of the North Atlantic Ocean.
When you talk about protecting high seas areas, and you think about the ones in the world we want to protect, and there are a lot of them, the Sargasso Sea stands out largely because there's something to see. You have this rainforest canopy, this upper branches of this tree that spreads out everywhere, and it's full. I mean, it is full of life.
It's a nursery area that just stays out there in the open sea. The young stages of tuna, of swordfish, of turtles.
The Sargasso Sea is teeming with life. It is an open ocean refuge for marine wildlife that justifies ranking alongside legendary terrestrial sites such as the Serengeti Plains and Yosemite Park.
No doubt, it's a pretty audacious and bold goal to think about protecting almost half of the planet. And but I'd like to give you some examples of things that give us hope. As one example, you just saw a clip about this in 2011. I led an effort with Sylvia, Earle, and others to create a precedent-setting high seas stewardship mechanism focusing on the Sargasso Sea. And to many people, the concept of doing that seemed impossible. 3 years later, on March 11, 2014, countries representing 300,000 linear kilometers of coastline adjacent to the Sargasso Sea signed the Hamilton Declaration for the Protection of the Sargasso Sea. The 9 signatories of that declaration now include the United States, Canada, the UK, Bermuda, and the Bahamas. So we began that effort in another era, pre some of the science observation, ocean observation technologies we heard about from Barbara. And to many people, we realized in beginning this that the high seas, including the Sargasso Sea, were just a dark desert, maybe lifeless, unknown, not understood. And through the lens of science, we dramatically changed that. We revealed a world that is full of life and connected to all of us. So we went in a very short period of time from something that seemed irrelevant, unknown, distant, to something that was highly relevant and essentially in our backyard. And a sense of remoteness was replaced by a sense of caring and a sense of stewardship. And that sense of stewardship led to the agreement in the Hamilton Declaration.
Esau, tell us about your community, your way of life, and how ocean change, climate change, has affected it.
So we have a clip here that I'd like to show you about Shishmaref, Alaska. Shishmaref, Alaska is an amazing place. I wake up every morning in my grandparents' house to an amazing view of the shoreline and the Chukchi Sea. Shishmaref will be underwater within the next 3 decades.
Can you tell me about your uncle? What was he like?
He was a great guy. He was amazing. Everybody loved him. June 2nd of 2007, he passed away. He fell through the ice. That's the first time I've ever seen climate change happen. So it's not just a political issue to me. It's personal. It's emotional. Long time ago, we used to have up to 2,500 more feet of the island, and that there was 19 houses over here. My work with the Arctic Youth Ambassador Program, which was in conjunction with the U.S. Chairmanship of the Arctic Council since 2015 to 2017, we are 22 youth from 18 different communities all over Alaska advocating and addressing the problems that we see in our communities, not only climate change, but also social justice issues, ocean acidification, these other issues in Alaska that we see, in our own community. And we talk to President Obama, Secretary Jewell, Secretary Kerry, and Justin Trudeau. We talk to prime ministers and delegates all over the Arctic nations, addressing our problems that we see as young people in these communities. And that's what I do with the Arctic Youth Ambassador Program.
Now we know what we could not know when I was a kid, that the ocean governs climate, absorbs much of the heat, regulates temperature. It's 97% of Earth's water is out there in the ocean. And we have a chance that will never come again.
Protecting our natural systems is an increasing presidential priority.
Preservation of our environment is not a liberal or conservative challenge. It's common sense.
In 1983, President Ronald Reagan laid claim to a blue America, 200 miles off our shores. As little explored as the West in Jackson's day, and as full of natural wonders.
I want to thank Sylvia Earle. She sat me down and gave me a pretty good lecture about life. So I'm walking in here, I actually saw Theodore Roosevelt's portrait over there. What's interesting is that we are here to fulfill a legacy of conservation that was first begun by Theodore Roosevelt. This action will create the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands Marine National Monument, the largest single conservation area in the history of our country, and the largest protected marine area in the world.
We have a chance that will never come again to stabilize things, protecting the natural systems that are still in good shape and restoring what we can.
I am in awe of anybody who's done so much for ocean conservation.
That's a good start.
All of us depend on these ecosystems, and
Yes.
they're incredibly,
Yes.
in some ways, they're incredibly resilient if we do the right thing, but they're also really fragile when we do the wrong thing.
People have to know.
It's not enough to just talk about policy in the abstract. People have to see it and feel it and be able to understand what it is that we're fighting for and why this is so important.
So within the national jurisdiction areas, the exclusive economic zones, things are beginning to move in the right direction. And it was actually George W. Bush who lit a fire. Nations around the world began to take notice.
Our intention is to explore this big idea of high seas as a marine reserve, including all of the commitments that it would take to make that happen. And there are 6 elements of our plan at this point.
First, we hope to inspire an overarching global high seas marine reserve compact among nations to bring better governance and stewardship to all high seas globally through the United Nations. At a recent World Ocean Day session of the United Nations, we saw very significant support for ocean protection.
Second, a campaign through films and other media to create an understanding and awareness about what high seas are and why they're important. Third, we intend to explore the creation of a United Nations special envoy for oceans. We want to engage the public and particularly the next generation of stewards. And we're considering the creation of an ocean conservation corps modeled after other volunteer organizations like the Peace Corps and many others that have such an impact on society.
We intend to harness the game-changing power of new technology to transform marine monitoring and enforcement capabilities in the high seas and elsewhere.
Finally, this is very important. Because high seas are adjacent to all oceans on the planet, our effort is potentially beneficial to all of those. And we see an opportunity there to create a global service and advocacy center for inspiring and supporting local marine conservation efforts across the world. So the time is now. Those are our 6 elements.
That's great.
The coolest aspect of this plan is to empower youth. So Ocean Conservation Corps is a new concept, and the idea is to get a service year funded for everyone from 18 to 28, college-age students, as well as students of younger ages. And we know from experiential learning that there is no better way to take today's youth and give them the experience of what oceans are than to put them on ships, have them conduct curiosity-driven science, do papers themselves that test new hypotheses, and then give them a transformative experience that allows them to really feel the power of sail and oceans and salt.
It's now known the ocean governs climate, shapes planetary chemistry. It's so important to everything, to every form of life on Earth. So, this is the big idea. Now's the time. Not only as never before, but maybe as never again.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's save the high seas and thank our wonderful panelists.